Well, let's shift over to phonics then. My name is Tristan Scholze. I'm in Fukuoka, and this is going to be not really a presentation at all, but more of an open discussion. So a lot of people, use phonics in one way or another, but let's get together and talk about it and share some ideas. Maybe we can just start off with some questions like, what is phonics? Anybody have some ideas? I mean, there are a lot of very similar words. There's phonetics, there's phonemes, and there's phonology. What is phonics? Can anybody try to put it into words?
I think
if you want to talk, just unmute yourself. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I think, of course, there are many technical definitions, but at the moment, phonics is such a catchword for so many places to get business, and everybody says we do phonics and we do phonics. So it's sort of become very commercialized. And are people really teaching phonics, or is it just it's something to draw in people? So
it's kind of, that's one definition. It's a catchphrase trying to get people to join their school or buy the materials. Jim, just a minute. There's Alan in the chat said the association between written text, graphemes, and sounds, phonemes.
Yeah.
Okay, Jim.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's matching the letters with the sounds.
Mm-hmm.
You teach the letter and you say this letter represents this sound, or similar to those sounds.
Right. I think in our case as language teachers, we're also talking about phonics as a system of teaching reading and writing, a way to look into that.
For me, it's just skill to be taught, or the children to learn with the end goal of to be able to read. So the end goal should be to have children to read, and you need not just phonics to be able to achieve that goal. So you would need things like phonological awareness, rhymes, syllables, sight words, whole language learning. And for me, phonics is just one small skill for the big goal, the big picture of getting kids to read.
Yeah, I think that's going to be an important part of this discussion is, what is phonics' place in reading, so that, it's not the end point. Reading is a lot more than just phonics. All right. A few more people entering the room here. Well, okay. So I think we kind of know what it is. Does anybody have some questions about what it is or what it is not? I think there are various understandings of what phonics is. So if anybody has some questions or want to put out an interesting, what's the difference between phonics and something else? Anybody?
I'd like to make one comment. It doesn't answer that question or address that exactly, but when we talk about reading, there's kind of two steps. There's the decoding of the text into sounds, and then there's the decoding of the sounds into meaning. And phonics is the first half of that, not the second half. Phonics doesn't give you meaning. It only gives you, it takes written text and suggests to you what the sounds of that are. Then what those sounds mean is another question. But I mean, to me, people say, well, like someone said, phonics is a small piece. I wouldn't say small. I would say that to me, phonics is the foundation of going from the written text to the sound. It doesn't, take care of the thing completely. There are sight words, that you need to learn just by, that don't fit into the phonics, of course. But the vast majority of words can be decoded by phonics ultimately. And so it's kind of, for me, that's kind of the foundation of getting to the sounds. And then, attaching meanings to the sounds, as I say, that's a whole other step.
Okay, yeah, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, that's true. It's a step, and you mentioned sight words. it turns out, or it seems, that actually it's more important for beginning readers. I mean, when you first come across a word the first time, what you're going to do is try to sound it out. And for that, phonics is important. So for beginners, it's more important than it is for more advanced learners, because more advanced learners have learned those words as a sight word. So if you come across the word house for the first time, you're going to go, huh, house, and try to sound, excuse me, trying to use phonics to decode the meaning. But if you've seen that word, well, some people are lucky and they learn them quickly, and some people it takes more time, like a kanji. And once you've learned it as a sight word, then you no longer need the phonics. So it turns out that phonics is more important for young or low-level learners and or people who are coming across words the first time. Yeah, it's a step.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mitsue in the chat mentioned I stopped introducing the alphabet song in my classes and changed into phonics songs. So yeah, that's an interesting comment. I think that's a huge topic that comes up with so many teachers. Alphabet ABC song is huge. Kids love it. They hear it outside of class even. But there seems to be a big difference if you're, I mean, for the groups that many of us are working, not everybody here, a lot of people are teaching at international schools here or working with high level language students or have children who are native level or near native level. And then looking at kids that are coming to once a week English that are basically complete beginners. There's just a huge difference between that. You know, if you're a near native speaker and you've got English all around you, you've got written language all around you, you've got people, you know, adults reading and speaking, reading books to you every day. That's extremely different than seeing it once a week for 45 minutes or an hour. In those cases, phonics is much more important, I think, as a stepping stone to start figuring out how to map on the sounds of the language onto how it's read and written.
I've got a question, Tristan, and I don't know what the answer to this is, but years ago I read that even fluent readers, you know, we say, okay, once you've seen the word house enough times, you just see it as a whole word. But I remember hearing or reading years ago that actually even the words that we already know, that somehow they've been able to track the eye of the person who's reading, and that we still check, we are still noticing the individual letters or individual graphemes, but it's so quickly, because we have seen those words before, we're doing it so quickly that it feels like we're seeing the whole word, but we're actually, in most cases, not. Does anyone know if that's still the current thinking, or if that, do I have that all wrong, or what? I really don't know what the answer to that is. Anybody here know?
Well, I've heard it in a couple of different ways. One, you know, advanced readers are processing things pretty fast and not actually decoding all the words. You ever see those, it's like Facebook memes and going on and all the letters are rearranged, but you can still read the paragraph? Yeah. It has, so you're like processing a shape of the word, almost like a kanji, rather than actually decoding it. But then, you know, say you go to the doctor and they give you some medicine or some other thing that has a word you've never seen in your entire life or heard it, you have to decode it. And you're using the patterns that you've built up over your lifetime of how, you know, and it gives you a pretty good guess of how to pronounce that word, even if you've never seen it before. That's what we're helping the kids learn how to do.
I would argue, Tristan, that the thing you mentioned about mixing up the letters in the word, that's actually support for the opposite of you, because if you're memorizing the whole word, once the letters are mixed up, it's not that word anymore. If you're still recognizing it, you're not recognizing the whole word. You're noticing the letters that are in it. And part of you is kind of, so I think what's happening, there's two things. You're noticing the individual letters and you're anticipating what the likely order of those letters is. You know, so if you take the word house and move the S to someplace different, I think if you've memorized the whole word, I would think that would just throw you off. You'd say, what is this? It's not the word that I know because the S is in the wrong position. But if you're noticing the letters And your brain is also, it's not just looking at the letters, it's also, you know that word, so you kind of make an assumption. Okay, I see the S and the O and it must be house. Even if it's in the wrong letter, you can make that assumption. So that seems to me, I've heard other people say what you said, but that seems to me like an argument for the opposite thing, that we are still noticing the letters.
Well, I might have, I think I'm not sure if that was appropriate, the comparison to kanji, but definitely the shape is involved, the shape of the word. And you may not be reading the individual letters and putting them together in the decoding process that beginners are doing. But you're right that you're picking up clues that you know by sense of the language what the next word could be. You know, are you going to get a verb, or, you know, is it part of a phrase where, you know, the first two, you just automatically know what the next word is going to be without even looking at it, which is kind of a similar thing as when you're, you know, why it's so hard to catch mistakes, especially if you've been the one who wrote them and you're reading on something and you don't even see the error in your own text because your brain is like mapping that on. So I don't know, an analogy Jim talked about in his presentation about babies from Patricia Cool, like mapping on sounds like a magnet and just kind of goes in there. It's almost like when you're reading, you're looking at the words and you're just like, oh, that's automatically this word. And it just happens so fast that you don't actually notice that there's a spelling error or something like that in it. So I don't know, I'm not an expert on that for sure by any means, but that's the impression I get.
Yeah, there was, excuse me, but there was, and I'm not an expert either, but there was maybe still is a movement called sight reading, right? Word reading, where they think that you read by looking at the word itself. And I think the movement is away from that and back to phonics for lower levels and beginners. So yeah, I don't know, but there are those two ways. There are definitely two ways of looking at it. And one is sight reading, sight words, and the other being phonics based.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I think for us, most of us, maybe not all of us, who are teaching in Japan, I mean, we're working with, especially for young learners, I think the focus, we need to think about phonics because they're in a very different place than we are, processing words and the ability to read and knowing the language behind it. You know, they're totally coming at this language for the first time. So you got to think back. Like, I can't ever remember a time in my life when I couldn't read my native language. I mean, I can't even imagine that. So it's difficult. So having to go back to the beginning again and put ourselves in the shoes of our students to think about that and how to help them be able to read and write English. Is it going to be a big help for them? Well, let's go into a question here. What are the advantages of teaching phonics?
The ability to encounter new words and not be like totally lost. Like someone pointed out, it might have been Peter Warner who pointed out, there's a big difference between seeing a new word. Like, let's say a student encounters the word bishop and they've never learned that word before. There's a big difference between saying, what does bishop mean? And what's this word? If you don't know phonics, you just it's just a jumble. It does, meaningless, right? But if you know phonics, you go, oh, bishop. What does bishop mean? You're halfway to your goal. You've got the sound.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
so that way
is example with parents sometimes of my students. I don't know, maybe you can tell me if this is a good example or not, but it's like, because I know English and I know the phonics system, like I can pick up another language that uses the alphabet and I can at least basically read it. Horrible pronunciation maybe, but I can have an idea of what it says and maybe I can ask a question about it. I could read a dinner menu in Italy or something like that. But if I get to a kanji I don't know, it's just, that's the end. Unless you're going to take the time to look it up in the dictionary and figure out how to pronounce it, you're just done. So if the kids can have that kind of power where they might not know the word yet, but if they can know how to read it and how to pronounce it, they can ask about it. That's just a tremendous power that they can have, that that many of the parents that I'm working with, they don't have that power, and their kids will, and that's a huge advantage of being able to learn how to read. And phonics is one way to help them do that.
And you asked what the benefit of teaching phonics is. I mean, one of the benefits I feel of teaching phonics is if you can just kind of slide it into the lesson without too much pressure, dragging out too much, it can be something extra that's fun for the learners, something to break the lesson up. And I find a lot of times, maybe even in my past, I'd overdo the phonics. And I don't think there's a need, especially with young learners, to overdo phonics. It's just kind of just get in, teach it a little, get out. And then other parts in the lesson, you can still teach aspects of fluency and linked speech. So it doesn't even need to be one particular point in the lesson. It can be kind of embedded throughout the entire lesson.
What age are you talking about, Jesse? Jesse, what age are you talking about?
I'm talking mainly with elementary school students, but I mean, even when I'm teaching kind of lower level adults as well, I kind of use the same philosophy. I just don't want to make, phonology and these related aspects kind of a chore, or for it to be like a dedicated part of a lesson. It's because it can really beat down learners, especially young learners.
Yeah.
I don't think they can really wrap their head around is why it's important compared to other aspects of language learning.
Yeah, but you're talking about students who are already reading English at some level, right?
Like case by case. I mean, I teach primarily to lower grades in elementary schools, and I do the like the SOGO EFL lessons as well. So yeah, I just want to just kind of make it as fun as possible, and kind of just get in and get out, and just kind of keep hitting it throughout the lesson as much as possible. That's my style of doing it, though.
I have an experience. I teach online privately to a high school student, and it's such a huge handicap for her to not know phonics. She knows lots of stuff, but she doesn't know how to deal with simple words just because she hasn't been taught the phonics, and that's something that I think that is just is too bad. And as long as I'm unmuted, I have a question.
Sure.
I teach Hoikuen, so 0-sai from 0 to 5-year-olds mainly, and I start introducing phonics just the songs at 3 years old, and I can only meet with them like for 20 minutes to half an hour, twice a month.
Oh.
I just want to know how far. I can only dabble in it as what Jesse said. I can only dabble in the phonics and try to make it fun. One thing I found that they get very satisfied in knowing how to fit the puzzle pieces together. Like A makes this certain sound and T makes that certain sound. Can now make the sound at, but they still can't. They still don't know enough words to understand the bigger picture. It's just very putting puzzle pieces together.
Don't you feel that the bigger picture kind of takes a lifetime? I mean, I've been in Japan forever now, and my Japanese, the sounds I produce is still choppy, and lots of the foreigners I know, you can study the phonology to death, and you're never going to have a perfect Japanese come out of your mouth. And I think sometimes as teachers, we get preoccupied with kind of making sure that our learners are using English to a certain level or degree, and there's so many world Englishes now. It's like, who's to say which English is perfect?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
it was an interesting kind of taking thoughts from the last presentation here, and Peter's talking about success is I think we noticed that a lot of teachers were kind of, we want the best for our students, so sometimes we set high expectations, and when they're not met, we worry that that's terrible and awful, or we're not doing our job well enough and stuff. But just kind of finding success, noticing what the kids are able to do, and then realizing like how you can be in another country that's not your native, doesn't have your native language, and you'll never be perfect. You might never reach native speaker level, and you're not gonna, ever get there, and that's okay. And you're the teacher, like compared with most of your students are never going to be that level either, but you can help them kind of move forward and achieve some success and start to be aware that there's more. And I think the most important thing is helping them find an interest in it and hopefully a love for it and a desire to want to learn more after they leave your class, outside of your class in the real world.
So,
Jim and Peter.
Sorry, Jim, go first.
I just want to comment on the not being able to learn Japanese as well. Certainly, that's my problem as well. But if you start young, if you had started young, it would be probably better. I mean, that's the point, is you introduce these sounds as young as possible. Young people will learn them sooner. And as far as the world languages, that's absolutely true. We shouldn't be expecting people to sound like natives. In fact, there's a new international language developing, which is one of the most fascinating things probably in human history, since it's happening in the last 20 years. But there are core sounds. And if you look at Jennifer Jenkins' phonology for the 20th century, she sets out those sounds which are most important for intelligibility and comprehensibility for communicating in English. There's a lot of sounds that people have difficulty with that don't confuse, don't make communications more difficult. And then there are some core sounds, she calls them, that are really essential. So we can try to improve people's pronunciation without demanding or expecting them to sound like us. Right. And what's really exciting is learners are taking the language themselves. English as an international language is not going to be our native speakers. It's going to be its own language. It's happening, and that's very exciting. But in the meantime, if we start teaching them the core sounds young, they'll just be they'll be better. It'll be easier for them to read and speak and listen.
Thank you.
Could I just say one more? I'm sorry. Could I say one more thing? What Jennifer Jenkins did, in fact, was to study how non-natives communicate, not with the natives. See, that was the traditional way. They said, oh, what happens when people speak English? And it was a native speaking to a non-native, and they said, oh, it's the rhythm, and it's this. And she studied what happens when two non-natives communicate, which is what's going to be the international system. And what she found was that people speak slower because they're non-natives. And when they speak slower and they realize they're both non-natives, all the blendings and things that confused people when natives spoke disappear, and it's the sounds. The individual phonemes became the biggest block to communicate.
That depends on the language too, yeah? Like if I put a Chinese and an Indian together and they both speak English, they speak just as fast in the English as they do in their own language.
Well, some do, but I mean, this is what she found. This is what her study was. And she found that it wasn't grammar, because you can make a grammar mistake. You say, yesterday I go to the store. It doesn't matter, right? It cling, rings bells. That's, but if you're talking about people communicating with people, the biggest problem when two non-native speakers spoke. This is Jennifer Jenkins. If anybody wants, send me an email. I'll send her the thing. And it was the sound. So to get back to phonics, I'm off phonics. Sorry, I went too far.
All right, thanks. Let's give Peter a chance here.
What Jesse was saying, I'm sort of on that. We teach we don't teach phonics in the kindergarten. We got them 3 years, Nensho, Nenchu, Nensho. And we go through the alphabet twice, in the first grade and then in the second again, in the third grade again. And we have a song that we sing. It's the same song for 3 years, but nobody gets bored with it because the focus is we are singing the phonics. the A, and the B, but with the vocabulary. But the focus is not on the song, it's on something else that we say. All the kids say, yes, I can. And they love saying that. Little kids love saying, yes, I can. So we sing this song 3 years. And at the end of 3 years, every kid knows A, B, B. So when they go into the elementary school, there's no surprises there. Suddenly we go, they recognize these things. So then we start the blending and the segmenting. And it seems a lot easier then, because we're just putting the two sounds together now, and they suddenly go, bang, there's 3 years of that coming back. And suddenly they get really excited that they can now put this stuff together. But we never taught it, because then it would get boring and they'll be tired of it by the time they start elementary school. So it is really exciting to get to elementary first grade. And suddenly this song they've been singing for 3 years, oh, it fits together. And then it goes really fast.
I think it's interesting, Peter, something I want to expand on that a bit. Rather than just teaching, this is the phonics we're teaching them. What I think we're really hoping for, and what the students can really do would be helpful for the students, is to help them be able to see, to notice patterns and make connections that will help them guess how to read and write new words. So rather than some sort of mathematical precision, putting together formulas and equations of this equals this, and you put it together, it's kind of a creative process. You're putting these sounds together and you're coming up with a guess.
It's magic
like,
for the kids.
If I read the prescription of this drug that I've never heard of before, I'm making a guess at how to pronounce it. Or, I'm trying to pronounce some of your names out there. I'm guessing. And that's what we need the kids to be able to make an educated guess. But
they will, yeah, they do. Mm-hmm. Like if we sing D, D, O, G, G, for 3 years, then by the time we get to the last grade, about 6 months before they graduate kindergarten, we suddenly start putting those sounds together, and they go duh, or, and we just put the letters on there, and there's just this magic that they suddenly, there's a word there, there's dog, and they're so excited about that. So we start that process, and that sort of, it's an adventure. It's really exciting.
Yeah, and also I think you're starting this process by kind of, with fun,
of course.
Teaching young learners. And I think, doing these kinds of lessons, the first and the most fundamental question is like, is this fun? And I think with a lot of phonics lessons, maybe a lot of lessons I've seen in the past, I don't know if teachers who teach young learners are starting with that question, like, is this fun for my students? And if it's fun, then it works usually.
Yeah, we don't even ask that. We ask, can you do it? And every kid goes, yes, I can. And this is what they sing 3 years through the kindergarten. And they will walk around. Can you do it? Yes, I can. So that's the thing they really remember from the song, but they've actually learned those sounds as well. So, but that's the fun part, the D and the O, and that's not the fun part, but they're learning that.
Okay.
So, great.
Can I switch to the opposite side of this? Are there any disadvantages to teaching phonics out there?
No.
Can there be any negative effects?
But if you do it wrong, I think if you do it wrong, or you do it in a way like Jesse said, where it's boring, it can.
What do you mean? What's wrong?
Well,
what's a wrong way to teach it?
Well, I think the wrong way is to teach it without passion, and you're just going through the motion. And if it's not exciting, then kids are going to get something, they carry that. So if you make phonics boring, it's very easy to make it boring, very easy, but you can make it exciting too. So if it's boring, then do you think they're going to be excited when they get to kindergarten and that D thing comes back again, and it's like, then they have to put it together, and then it's like math, then it gets really...
All right, so they're connected to how they engage with it. They're emotionally involved. They interested. They wanted more. Yeah, Jim?
I think one of the problems with phonics is that English is not what they call transparent language. In other words, Spanish, for example, every sound is exactly that sound, and there are no silent letters, and there are no double letters, and there are no exceptions. So if you learn the Spanish alphabet, you can literally pronounce every word because every sound is clearly represented by the letters. English isn't that way. We've got odd sounds. We've got the silent E. We've got, you teach them H is H, O is O, M is M, and E is
Yeah, but you don't
N.
start like that, yeah?
And then you show them home and they go home, and they go, no, go man. It's home. And love is not love. It's not like glove. So, I mean, I don't know if that's a drawback, but that's one of the problems with English phonics is that English is less transparent than other languages. So.
Well, right. English has got a very complicated writing system. And when we're working with beginners, young kids, trying to make sense of this extremely complicated thing that is kind of normal to us advanced speakers and people are used to it using every day. For them, it's just how do you got to break it down into recognizable patterns to let the kids help put it together and figure it out for themselves.
And some of the exceptions.
It's logical for a long time. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah, it's going to take a long time.
It is logical for a long time. And if you get through that period, then you can start introducing all these irregularities. I mean, in the beginning, there's a lot of consistency. Yeah. So if you get through that, it's like learning anything. If the beginning is like putting up hurdles, then it's not going to be fun. But if you get to a certain point where you've experienced success, you're ready to go, like you said, you're ready to go on to the next step. And then the fact that love is LOVE doesn't matter. It's just another little challenge, and it's not difficult to overcome then.
It's
everyone is interested.
Noting exceptions to patterns and patterns themselves and putting them together. I'd like to say one more thing about the negative effects. And I've done it myself in the classroom, being too focused on phonics and too focused on student accuracy. And it can reach what Peter was talking about, maybe getting, too much frustration in the student or not being fun enough, or even if they really enjoy it and they love that accuracy, maybe they'll be more hesitant to speak or to try to write a word because they're not sure if they can do it perfectly. So letting them make mistakes, letting them go ahead and try things out and generally, learn as they go along, rather than trying to be too set in some sort of mathematic formula. Because there's actually a lot of phonics out there. I mean, I think there's a core sense of, I've got here about 40 phonic sounds, alphabet, few double letter sounds, a couple of magic E type of phonics, but there are a lot more. And then plus all of the, English borrows so many words from other languages. Like, there's like a few people in this discussion that I don't think I can pronounce your last names, or I'd have to make a wild guess. And that's just part of the English language. And that's fine. So many patterns, but we got to make it achievable for these students without making too burdensome. So I think we got to really understand our students well and keep it simple. The focus is on making guesses rather than memorizing formulas.
Yeah, that's what I like about David's book, #1 book, where it does exactly that. By the time you finish book 1, they have a really good grounding of reading, and then you can introduce a lot of these other sounds. It's okay then. They understand the process.
Someone said about teaching it wrong. I think for me, one way of teaching it wrong is to make it rigid, which I think is what you guys are saying is don't teach it as a rigid thing, because it's not. As Tristan was saying, there's all these exceptions and special words and so forth.
And I want to build off what Tristan was saying is that, basically everything that we put into our classes, it's all kind of a trade-off. So if you overdo any one thing, then that's when it becomes wrong or bad or negative. As long as everything's balanced and you can just kind of get in there, teach it, get out and move along with the lesson and not kind of overburden the students with any one thing, including phonics.
Yes.
So yeah, I think was it Mark who somebody said at the beginning, overall goal here is to help the kids, learn to read and like reading. So, there's phonics, but then there's a lot more than phonics if you're going to learn to read. So we think about that too. They've got to figure out, who was it also somebody said about, you're just decoding the sounds of a word. You don't know what it means. So skills beyond that, trying to figure out, a lot of the students I have, they don't even think they'll read a word phonetically, and then there's like a picture of that word right there on the page, and they don't even look at it. Like they haven't developed that skill or that sense to connect the words with what's in the picture. And to me, as a teacher, it's so obvious. I don't even think that that's a step that the students need to go through. But that part of that skill of being aware of everything else, being aware of the language. So I mean, phonics is really important, but I don't think it's the end. There's a lot more in there. So learning to read, reading stories, finding meaning in the stories, that's going to go beyond the phonics. Let's go back just a little bit to basics of phonics here. How about anchor words? People use anchor words. Does everybody use anchor words, or only some people? Everybody know what anchor words are?
I used to put a really strong emphasis on anchor words until just recently I read that actually anchor words can be kind of a detriment, that I don't think I can express clearly what I read because it's been a while, but maybe you know what I mean. The anchor words can actually get in the way.
It might depend on, its use and where the kids are. I think that anchor words are crucial in the beginning, to be able to hear a sound that's not in your native language, and connect it. If you got a which doesn't exist in Japanese, it's so abstract, and you're hearing it for the first time. You're trying to train your brain to make this neural connection. Jim can probably explain it better than me, but anyway, you're trying to create that and be able to pick that up. So having it connected to an anchor word can be really helpful. So igloo is a lot easier to understand than just it. But if you're further along and you've got the sound down, you don't need to keep the anchor word all the time. For advanced students, I might use it as a helpful thing to distinguish between which letters we're using to represent a sound. Say like the sound. Is that as in teacher, as in girl, as in nurse or purse, or as in doctor? They all use the same sound, but different ways of writing it. So you might want, this word is, sailor is spelled with doctor. So that way the anchor word can come in even for advanced students, instead of just thinking about, DOCTOR. There's not any comprehensions of how the sounds are working. That's just a memorization of which letters are in there.
So if I could just share, to add what you're saying there, like how I would use anchor words, or how I do use, in my context, I would always present the letter, elicit the name of the letter and any sounds of the letter. I actually use vertical phonics, meaning I teach all the sounds that one letter can make. So for example, the letter I has 3 sounds: I, E. We air write it. We can look at some anchor words. So I have a picture, they can read the anchor word. Also, that we only use anchor words at the beginning. Once they've had a couple of exposures, I might elicit, hey, what other it words do you know? And they may say, pig. Oh, sorry, not words, sorry. What sounds do you know that have that word in? So they might go pig, pig, or ice cream, or they may just make up a new word themselves. So then once we've moved on from the anchor word, we go into a reading component. Normally it's a short poem. We read the poem together, or I will read it, or they will read it. We'll see if we can identify the letter I in the poem. What is the word? Is there any visuals to like help with meaning? And that's like a quick snapshot of like how I would do a phonics component.
All right, thank you, Mark. Cool. We haven't said a lot about writing yet for phonics. How important is writing? We've talked a lot about speaking and reading. What do you guys think about that? How important is writing for phonics? Do you introduce them at the same time, reading, writing, speaking, or at different times? Or do you do much writing at all? That's kind of our industry is often called the eikaiwa for those of us teaching language schools. Kind of implies there's not reading and writing involved, but what do you guys do actually?
Nobody's responding.
Well, I'll answer my question. I at the same time, for elementary school students, they'll learn the reading and writing of the sound at the same time.
Yeah, I do too. Start the reading and the writing, but I don't. The writing can really slow things down, and
yes.
Writing gives you lots of opportunities not to have success, because you have to stop them and stop them and stop them, and sort of I do it, but I don't, it's not my focus. I wanted to read and speak, but we do writing. It's important.
The good thing about writing is it consolidates all of the other skills together.
Exactly.
It's the most difficult, I think, and it uses them all. So when you're able to write it, your ability to read it is definitely there. So it's also something that the parents can see as an example of what the kids are accomplishing. The kid wrote this themselves, something like that. Sorry, Mitsue, did you have a comment?
Oh yeah, it's just I think what you just said is gives another angle, another entranceway into the cognitive.
Right.
Also for preschoolers, the motor skills are still not very developed. So it's just one way to challenge them by connecting, kinesthetically?
Yeah.
That was said, to connect the body movement with the writing and the language and all that's all in our minds and in our head, to connect it with the body. So I just think I do that just to make a connection with motor skills.
Okay.
All right. Do you do that with the words or the sounds or?
No, just phonics.
I was reading something about that, and it's apparently it's effective, right? I mean, it's the embodiment of, cognitive embodiment. I don't know that much about it, but I was reading somebody who does that, and there's a couple studies somewhere about how effective that is.
It's introducing a new dimension to something that they already feel confident about.
And I think young people like to move so much that would be equally effective. Yeah.
Yeah. So I start with a song, and then with the song, there's the lyrics to the song, and I ask them to circle, and that's when they start connecting the sound with a word. Okay. It's not necessarily phonics, but it's just connecting all the dots in different ways.
I think that might be really good.
Yeah, I'd like run out of time, but I'd like to talk about that more. Your favorite phonics activity? Does everybody have? If you do share, please just share one, because we've got one each. Anybody got a really good phonics activity they like? You can share with others.
We just heard a good one.
Yeah.
My favorite
more.
When it gets to the more complicated rules, I like to tell stories about why they make the certain sounds. So an example is the letter T and the letter H. We have a secret story. The letter T and the letter H, they hate each other, but they're always together. So when they're together, they always go, and I get the kids to exaggerate that. And I have a picture, TH, and the T and the H are sticking the tongue out. That's one of my activities.
Yeah, that reminds me of how I introduced the sound in love. Just make it very guttural. It's just a gross sounding thing. It just allows them to, because it's not a very polite sound in Japanese, as well as the TH sound. It's not very polite to stick out your tongue. So I encourage them to talk like this so that they just get used to looking silly.
Yeah, you tell your students that, you know, English is kind of dirty. You gotta, I do. I say, you gotta open your mouth. You gotta say, oh, you gotta stick your tongue out to say, duh. You know, it's not clean. Japanese is clean. English kind of dirty. So yeah, they laugh.
Yeah. It loosens them up as well for adults too.
Okay, well, I want to share something with everybody in the chat here. So this is a YouTube playlist all about phonics. This is a group of videos created by David Paul. I've seen all of them. They're really, really good. And they're full of phonics, different phonics systems and some questions and whys behind things, but also lots of activities that you can use yourself and how to connect using phonics for reading and writing and speaking and listening and all together. So I check it out. There are 5 videos. They're only 10 minutes long or so each, but they are packed with really interesting stuff. So highly, highly recommended. Anybody's got some other activities, phonics activities that they'd like to share?
I'll talk about one that a game that I created that I call spelling sets. I haven't got anything prepared to show you, but basically there's each child. Actually, hold on, give me like 20 seconds. Hold on.
Sure, Alan. Yeah, somebody mentioned syllables in the chat. It's kind of, another step beyond phonics to putting in, combining phonics into a syllable, or once you're getting into the reading word stage, breaking up words back down into syllables. And that's also leading into ideas of stress and intonation as well, a little bit more involved. Chris Clancy, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Hi. Yeah, syllables. I begin teaching phonics or phonemics or whatever you want to call it with Deconstructing Japanese, right? Someone was talking about Spanish being phonetically accurate, if you will. So is Japanese, if you break it down into Romaji, okay? And syllables. Japanese has only open syllables, right? Either the vowel syllables, I, E, U, A, O, or all other syllables beginning with the consonant and ending in a vowel. English, as everyone knows, is composed of mostly closed syllables. Okay, so teaching syllables is important, right? Hence, if we don't teach syllables, you get people, saying my name, my single syllable, name, Chris, as Kurisu, right? Okay, so I break it down to from words. I break it down to syllables and then individual sounds, right? Words, letters, number of letters, number of syllables, and then number of individual sounds.
Yeah, I think that's important. Also, the distinction between open and closed syllables. And actually, when kids are learning to process phonics, combine them, we'll often focus on close end. So not really, before teaching or helping the students discover when they're combining a vowel and a consonant, rather than ta, it would go to at first, closing on that, because I think that's it's an important thing that's not really there in Japanese, that they need to discover how to learn. Otherwise, they're going to add by default a vowel at the end of everything. And
hence the shiritori activity in English, right? So shiritori. I usually begin with shiritori, and that's 3 syllables basically. 4 syllables. Shiritori, right? But then going on, someone will begin the next word with like risa, the squirrel, whatever. But in English, try it in English, right? Everyone will try to use a word that begins with the re combination of phonemes, right? Read or something. But no, the actual final phoneme of shiritori is e, right? So then the next word would be something like east or easy. So yeah, breaking syllables, breaking words down into syllables is also important.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Yeah.
Can I show this now?
Yeah, go ahead, Alan. Thank you.
So I've got, you don't have to make a board this fancy, but this has got 6 words. And oh, thank you. The board's got 6 words, and there's going to be, and there's an image and 3 letters. So this particular one is set up for CVCs mostly, like cat and dog, 3-letter words mostly. I have another side for longer words. But so each one will be 1 image and then the 3 letters that spell that. So it'll be a picture of a cat, there's C and an A and a T. And there's 6 of them. So there's 24 tiles altogether. And they just get the bag of tiles and they get the board and they just start putting them up there. If they don't know the word, they say, what's this? Oh, that's a, whatever it is, a hog, let's say, or a pig, whatever. And so they put the picture that, they put the picture there, what's this? I tell them what it is. And then they look for the letters. And if you've got a group of kids, it works best because you circulate around checking kids. And when they finished, and the thing is that they're supposed to finish before they ask for your help. And so some of it they're not going to know. So this encourages them to take guesses. So they learn to take guesses so that they can say finish and you come over. And if it's not right, whichever ones are wrong, it's laid down this way. So it's gravity is holding the tiles there. And I just take the ones that are wrong and I just set them off to the side. Oh, this one's different. And I'll say the word for them again. And then I walk away. And so all of the ones that are correct are still in place, kind of like Wordle. And the other ones are piled over here, but they've heard it again. So they get to guess again. So there's no like, that's wrong. There's nothing negative that happens. They just get another chance to try to fix it. And each time they get a little closer until they get all in place. So that's one of my favorite activities to do in terms of phonics, because it encourages them to guess. There's no negative feeling if they don't get it right, and it teaches them to be more autonomous.
Thank you, Alan.
That's mine.
Great. I can add one more, as well as learning how to spell words on there too. I think it's very, very useful for the kids to try to spell words that aren't words. To practice playing with the sounds and putting them together, coming up with like early on CVC words or VC words, or even longer words that don't have any meaning, so that they're not relying on their memorization of the word they have to actually process it. That can be really fun and very useful. Yeah, Jim. Just 1 minute before we do
1 minute. That last comment you made is interesting because it turns out that it's good for using nonsense words.
Yeah.
I would just like to close by suggesting readingrockets.org. It's a site in the United States, Reading Rockets, one word, .org, and they have just pages and pages about teaching reading, and they have activities for the classroom. They have a lot of links and articles, and you can find a lot there about teaching phonics. And it goes to what the fellow just said about starting with words and breaking them into syllables and breaking the syllables into sounds. They've got a lot of information there, readingrockets.org. I'll finish with that.
All right, thank you, Jim.